Hello, my name is Benjamin Marty. I'm the author of Scrolling Game Development Kit, and now I'm starting a project called iotaBuildIt. It's an experimental project in crowdsourced 2D game development. Other games with editors encourage players to contribute their own levels using a predefined set of building blocks, but my goal with iotaBuildIt is to see how it works out when players are encouraged not only to create their own distinct levels, but to make modifications to existing levels. And I also want to see how it works when players can not only use predefined building blocks, but redefine anything down to the graphics and code driving the game. I want to try this on a large crowdsourced scale where there are lots of people contributing and reviewing modifications. What you see here is the iotaBuildIt game itself running in a browser. It's starting out as a relatively simple project with pretty basic graphics, but I hope it can grow from here. This is the tutorial level, which I encourage you to play to see what kind of features are already available and get ideas of what you could build and enhance. It doesn't cover everything, but gives you an impression of what kind of game this is. There are a number of pieces available that the tutorial doesn't cover, and a number of pieces available in the project that are left incomplete, kind of as an invitation to players to expand here or there. So in this video, I want to show you how to participate in iotaBuildIt by submitting your own modifications. I won't go into a lot of detail, but I want to cover the basic process and maybe leave more detail for other videos. So to get started, you'll want to navigate to http://iotabuildit.sf.net, which is the starting point with all the links you'll need to learn about and participate in iotaBuildIt. I don't know that I'd really call this a home page because there's not a lot of detail about the project here, but it has all the links you'll need for getting started and participating, so this is the page I'll be using in this video. For full details on the project, you'll want to visit this first link here, the wiki homepage. I intend to maintain most of the project content in the wiki so that users can contribute not only to the improvement of the game, but of the site itself by submitting improved wiki content. Briefly summarizing what you'll need to participate is a SourceForge account for hosting your own copy of the code, Scrolling Game Development Kit 2 for making edits to the project, and Tortoise HG for retrieving, uploading, and merging your own changes and those of other users. Before getting any of the software though, let's create a SourceForge account if you don't already have one. If you click on the code link from our starting page here, you will see a SourceForge page that you'll want to access to get a copy of the code. But in order to do that, you'll want an account of your own where you can submit your own edits. So if you're not logged in, you should see a register link at the top, and you can click on that, enter all of your details for a new account. Now I'll just log into my own account to show you what you'll do after you have an account. I use my Google OpenID to log into my account, and there are a number of OpenID providers you can use to log into SourceForge, or just type in your username and password. If we go back to the code page now, we'll want to take notice of the links on the left. Here you see a command to fork the default repository, which will give you your own copy of the basic starting point code. But notice also there are other forks created by other users here. You can base your starting point on anybody's fork by clicking on their fork to view their code repository page, and then click on fork from their page. Wherever you start from, you'll be in total control of your own fork and have the ability to merge changes from other users' repositories into your own. So I'm going to go back to the base repository and make a fork from there. Now every SourceForge user account comes with a so-called user project where you can host code repositories, other online applications without having to create a formal SourceForge project. So you can see here u/BlueMonkMN is my own user project. The U indicates it's a user account rather than a P for a project. But I'll fork that repository into my personal user project. I'll call it my iota, all lowercase. I tried mixed case once and it didn't like it, so if you have problems, make sure you're using all lowercase. Now I have my own separate repository. Now let's download the software we'll need. First, Scrolling Game Development Kit 2. Back at the starting page, this link here takes you to the home page where you can find out all about SGDK2, as well as download it here on the download page. SGDK2 is currently delivered as a simple zip file, so you don't have to install anything. Just extract the files wherever you like and run the executable. I'm going to extract the files to a folder on my desktop Do make sure to specify a dedicated folder when extracting the files, because the files in the zip are all at the root and you'll want to contain them in a folder. So I'm creating a folder called SGDK2 here on my desktop. Now when you run the executable for the first time, it does set up a file association under your user account, so that double-clicking on an SGDK2 file will automatically load SGDK2 to edit the selected game file. But for now, we'll close down SGDK2. It seems to be working. The next step is to install iotaBuildIt. This is a Mercurial client. Mercurial is one of the latest systems for version control. That's how we allow many users to submit, share, and merge changes easily, and track the history of what has happened to the code. What makes it one of the latest generation of source control is that it's a distributed version control system, meaning there's no single central repository. Every user has their own copy and can share any changes arbitrarily between them easily. So each user has access to the full history of the project even when they're not connected to an online server. Anyway, HG is the elemental symbol for Mercury, so they named the client Tortoise HG to go along with the other members of the Tortoise series of version control clients. Here on their page, you'll see a button to download the client, which I won't walk through now because it's pretty straightforward. I have Windows 7 64-bit, so I would be getting the 64-bit client, as you can see here. But just accept the defaults as you install this, and it will give you access to new commands in your shell, which I'll demonstrate. Right-click on your desktop or wherever you want to add a folder to keep your own local copy of the iotaBuildIt code. Create a new folder. I'll call mine myIota to match the name I set up in SourceForge, but it can be named whatever you like. Then when you right-click on the folder, you'll see some new commands installed by Tortoise HG. Before you actually get the code, there is a one-time setup step you'll need to perform. From the Tortoise HG menu, select Global Settings, select Commit, and enter your SourceForge account name under the username here. This will make sure that Tortoise HG logs into your repository with the right username, and all you have to supply is your SourceForge password when interacting with your repository. After you have that set up, go back to the Tortoise HG menu and select the clone command, which will create the local copy of your repository. Now your repository address is back on your SourceForge code page here. Whenever you want to find that page, you'll want to click on your name at the top of a SourceForge page and then click on this My Project link. Then you can click on Code to access the online copy of your repository. Make sure you're looking at the RW read-write version of your repository link, and then copy just this piece. This is the URI that identifies your repository, and it doesn't have any spaces or include the rest of this, which is a complete command line to make a clone. But if you want to use Tortoise HG instead of typing a command line, you just need the URI piece. Copy that and paste it into the source field on the dialog, and then click Clone. You'll have to enter your SourceForge password. In my case, I have set up an SSH key on SourceForge, so I'm just entering the password for my SSH key, so it probably looks a bit different than what you'll see. This makes a local copy of the repository in the folder you selected, and you can see all these icons put here by Tortoise HG indicate the status of the files, whether they have changed since you last committed your changes to your local repository. Keep in mind now that you have not only a set of files representing one particular version, but a whole repository representing the whole history of all the files. And when you make changes to your local files, then you can compare and commit them to your local repository. Sometimes the icons on these files need some time to sync up, so if they don't look right, just give them some time. They should all be green to start with, indicating that everything is in sync and unchanged. Now, if we go back into the SGDK2 folder we just got, we will see the main project file we can double-click on to bring up the project in the SGDK2 environment. Of course, before you make any serious changes, you'll probably want to learn about iotaBuildIt, play the tutorial level, and learn about SGDK2 by looking at the sample project and the help file. But right now I'm just going to demonstrate how to make a simple addition to the level 1 map, which is where we have a starting point for a level. But there's not much there, so we could use a lot of contributions to make this an interesting level to play. I want to show you how to work with frames and tiles. Frames are the building blocks for tiles, tiles are the building blocks for layers, and layers are the building blocks for maps. So I'm just going to open up the main frame set here and change one of these frames to a slightly blue guy by adjusting the modulate red to 150 and the modulate green to 200. And then in order to use that on a map, we need to make sure it's accessible as a tile. In the tile editor here, we can add tile number 45, which is not explicitly mapped yet, and see that 45 is currently defaulting to some other picture of a player, which we're not using for anything else. So we can replace that with our blue guy to distinguish this tile from the player by deleting the default frame and dragging our own in. Now, if we go to the map editor for level 1, we can put this guy on the map. We'll put him up here for the player to talk to. And then I'll add a plan rectangle so we can specify an area where the player can push a button to talk to this guy. I click on the edit button, and now I can add rules for this plan to check if the player is in that area. I'll create a rule called if player is near blue guy. And we want to check if the player is in this rectangle. And we want to check player 1. And we'll say we care about the middle of the player being in that area. Then we want to add another rule to also check if player 1 is pressing button 2. So create a rule called and player is pressing button 2. And set the parameters to check if player 1 is pressing button 2. Then under these conditions, let's display a message using show message. So add another rule called show blue guy message, and the function will be show message, and the message will be I've lost my frog. If you see him, please make sure he has water. And that needs to be in quotes and use \n to indicate separate lines. This is actually just a C# expression that goes right into code. But if you want it to work on the web, it'll also have to be a JavaScript expression. Fortunately, quotes and \n are the same for C# and JavaScript. And before we actually test this, let's put his frog on the map here. Back in the map editor, I can switch to the Sprites tab and add a sprite from the All category. I see a frog here I can put over here. But before I put it down, I need to make sure that the sprite I'm placing will see the standard set of solid tiles as solid. So I'll select the standard solidity for this frog, and then I'll add him to the map. If you forget to select the solidity or any other property of the sprite before placing it, you can switch to select mode and select the sprite to fix it. Without proper solidity, the frog would just fall to the bottom of the map. Now if I switch over to the Tiles tab, I can select the solid ground tile and make a little place for him to jump around. Maybe I'll clear out the wall that was there before by using the empty tile too. I won't go through all the details of trying to make him interact with water or anything, but just show that you can add sprites too. Now let's demonstrate how to test the project. I'm going to show how to run it in HTML format. Normally you can simply press F5 or the run button to run the game as a binary executable, but for the purposes of iotaBuildIt, you'll probably want to test it in HTML format since that's how people run iotaBuildIt. In the File menu, select Export HTML5 code, and if you want to play the game locally with Chrome, for example, you'll have to make sure all the content gets embedded in a single file. So check this box to embed the images and select the option to embed all the JavaScript. It's an obscure security restriction about allowing JavaScript to access separate files from your local system that prevents Chrome and other compliant browsers from working with separate files when running locally. So you have to embed them for a local test. Internet Explorer, though, I believe lets you test successfully with separate files. We'll overwrite the one HTML file, and I'll just write it to the directory where the rest of the HTML5 content got copied for now. Now I can open that folder and run the HTML file to test it. Go out to the map and to level 1. Press the control key to go into the level. Wait for the platform and ride across. Crouching lets you jump extra high if you need a good jump. I can walk over here and up to the blue guy. Button 2 is the space bar, so I press space, and here he says he's lost his frog. And his frog is jumping over there. So it works. Let's close that and see how to submit this change for others to play and review then. Before you actually submit the files, make sure you export the HTML to separate files, because that's how they're maintained in the repository to more easily track changes to the different parts of the project. So in the Export HTML dialog, uncheck the box for embedding images in the HTML file and select the option to generate separate JavaScript files for every object. Then OK to generate the files and overwrite the 44 existing files. Tortoise HG will recognize which files actually have changes, even if their modification dates have changed. Do be sure to click Save or select Save from the File menu here to save the SGDK2 source code file as well, otherwise the HTML code that you're publishing will be out of sync with the source. I'll show you later how to handle that if you forget, like I did. Now on the folder where you cloned your repository, right-click and select HG Workbench. Here you can see all the details about the history and versions and changes you're making. You could also just select HG Commit directly from the menu if you like, but here in the Workbench you can see that the top of the list represents your local files and everything below it is the history of changes made in the repository. When you select your local copy, you can see the pending changes. If you're not a coder, maybe you can just use this to help you remember that you should have exported many separate files instead of just one HTML file, and also use it as a hint about which levels you affected by seeing here, for example, level 1 map changed. So before we actually commit the change, let's put a comment so we know what changed for our submission. Added a blue guy who has a message about his lost frog. And then we can make sure we're in commit mode with the commit checkmark icon, and then click the commit button and commit our changes to the local repository. Now all our files are in sync with our local repository, but in order for others to play, they will need to be in sync with the online repository. So to do that, you can click on this button to push your changes to another repository. This one shows you which changes will be pushed before pushing them, and this one just pushes them. But since those are really simple, I'm going to demonstrate the synchronize button here, which can also do this. On the synchronize page here, you see the same buttons, but you can also see the details about where you're pushing the changes to. Since your repository only knows the one online repository you cloned from, you only have one entry, but if you want to merge changes from other users, you can put other URIs in here and pull them from other repositories using a read-only URI that starts with HTTP if you don't have permission to write. So I'll push those changes up. Now in my case, when I close the SGDK2 file, I'm reminded that I had some unsaved changes. So the HTML code I just published is out of sync with the SGDK2 file, which means anybody wanting to build on my changes won't have the proper source to do so. Furthermore, if you ever lose your local copy of the code, you may never be able to recover what you'll need to build on your own past changes. So to maintain this critical synchronization between the source SGDK2 code and the HTML code, I'm walking through the commit and push process again to make certain the files are properly synchronized. Now if we go back to SourceForge and find our user project, we can look at the code. And the best part is we can play any version of the game directly from the online repository. Just click on the read-only version of the link, copy the URI, and paste it in the address bar. Then you can pick any version of the game and click on the Files link. Go into the HTML directory, find the HTML file, and click on that file link. And finally, at the top of the page, copy or click on the raw link. This is the link to play that version of the game directly from the repository. Now let's publish that version of the game for everyone else to play and review. From the starting page, click on Reviews. Then click on the button to edit this page so that you can add your new version to the end of the list. Rows of this table are constructed by starting with a vertical bar, separating each column with a vertical bar, and ending with a vertical bar. So I'm going to put my SourceForge account name, the date I last updated my submission, the URI to access my repository, which I abbreviate because it's too long to fit in the table, and then I put the revision with the full link to play that version directly from my repository. Next is based on, which should be your best approximation of another revision in the table on which your version is based. Basically, this is just another way to show which revisions are popular by indicating who is basing their own revisions on them. I might remove this column if it turns out to be too difficult to put meaningful values there. And finally, provide some sort of descriptive title. I'll use blue guy message. And observe how I specified link text and URLs here. Putting single square brackets around the title indicates that it will link to or create another wiki page where you can describe your submission in more detail. Let's preview that. Okay, and save it. Now you have a link to a page where people can comment on your version. And if you go back to the review listing, you can test your link to make sure it works to play the game. And if anybody wants to merge changes from your repository into theirs, they can copy the link address of your repository. Just make sure you use the read-only version of the link there, or it will just be a hassle for anyone to work out how to read from your repository because they won't have the password to access the writable link. Now in the review listing, we can click on the title and supply a simple page here describing our submission. This text is in Markdown format, so if you want to know more details about how to edit text in the wiki, click on the Formatting Help button. So on our new wiki page, put some simple content here. I will repeat the title of Blue Guy Message. And since this revision is just for demonstrating how to participate, I will just comment here that this revision is the one demonstrated in the iotaBuildIt participation tutorial video. And save it. Your revision is published and ready for all to play and review. That's all I have for this video. Keep your eyes open for new links and videos on the start page. I look forward to seeing your submissions.